I'd just like to start off by asking if any of you have ever had the feeling of too much. This is too much. So maybe you've had it in a work scenario, perhaps you've had it at home, or perhaps in a personal relationship where there is just too much going on, because that's definitely something that I have encountered. And currently, with lockdown and all the restrictions that are placed on us, and the pressure as well, it really reminds me of about 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, I had a very stressful job. And it got to the point where I was waking up every morning with a racing heart and a feeling of fear in my body. And that was before I'd even opened my eyes in the morning. So that was how my day was starting. And I acknowledged it was work. You know, work was making me feel stressed, or my reaction to the work, my reaction to my boss was making me feel stressed, and it was making me have these physical symptoms. It got worse. It got to the point where I was ill all the time and I was feeling extreme fatigue, and I realized that I couldn't cope. So I thought, you know what? Life's too short. This isn't worth it. So I left my job, and I thought my health is going to bounce back now because stress was causing the symptoms, right? So if I leave the stress, then the symptoms will go away. That is not how the human body works, unfortunately. So I went to my GP to try and get support, and they couldn't help me. And the problem is, although we now acknowledge that stress has a massive impact on our health, we don't learn about the interventions to put in place in order to bring our body back into balance. Once you've been through a stressful experience for a long period of time, your body has to adapt. The World Health Organization does now acknowledge burnout as a phenomenon or a syndrome, but they only associate it with an occupational experience. So they associate it with work. But what about the people who are experiencing burnout because of personal stress or personal relationships? I speak to so many clients on a daily basis who are completely frazzled, who are exhausted, and who don't know where to turn, and they don't even realize that it is their stress response that's driving their symptoms. So what can we do? What can we do in that scenario, and how can I help my clients? Well, my name is Marjolein Dutry. Sorry for the tongue twister I gave Reshma earlier. And I am a registered nutritionist. In my 20s, I went through burnout. So at the time, I had no idea that's what it was, but that was what all my symptoms were kind of leading to. It was my adrenal glands were under a lot of pressure. So as I said earlier, I was going to my GP, and they ran loads of tests, and they said, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you. But I felt like a 27-year-old trapped in the body of an 87-year-old. I was exhausted, and there was just always something wrong. So a bit like Andrew and his journey of discovery, I thought, I need to help myself. I need to find out how to fix myself. So at the time, I went to see a nutritionist, and I thought, what the hell, I have nothing to lose. So I went to see a nutritionist and saw an improvement, but it plateaued, and I still didn't know why. Why was I putting the recommendations in place? Why was I experiencing my symptoms? I really like to know the why behind things. So I decided I had to go and study for myself. So I retrained. I chose the Institute for Optimum Nutrition because it was very strongly science-based. You had to have a science qualification. That was really important to me. I wanted evidence-based stuff. So that was me. I retrained for 3 years. And so 2.5 years ago, I qualified. And since then, I've helped over 80 clients with health issues. And like I said, a lot of them are experiencing problems with stress, and they are massive drivers of their symptoms. So how how can I help there? Well, firstly, I need to know what's going on in there. Everyone is biochemically unique, which means that everyone's experience of stress is different, but it also means that there's something slightly different going on in everybody's body. There's no one size fits all approach. And this is where I think, we get a bit stuck when we're going back to the GP. They'll try, they'll follow the diagram of, oh, this is the symptom, then this must work. And when it doesn't work, we don't know what to do. So my mission is to find out what is going on for my clients. So I do testing, I do lab testing. And this is particularly important with people who are going through stress or burnout, because your body goes through different stages. So we have to start with a back to basics of the stress response. What happens? Okay, so the stress response is there to keep us safe. It's to keep us out of danger. It's the fight or flight. So our brain will perceive something as dangerous, and it will send a message to your adrenal glands to produce stress hormones. And that then causes changes in the body, and it redirects a lot of resources so that we can run away or fight or hide. But it means that we get lots of blood going to the muscles. It means that we've got lots of sugar in the blood so that we're fueling our muscles. But it also means that things that are then non-essential get shut down. Now, this stress response is an acute response. It's designed to kick in, and then when we're safe, it goes. So when we think about something that we need to escape from or hide from and be really clever about, then it works. But what happens if you have a colleague that you don't get on with? Or what happens if you have a boss who's extremely critical? Or what happens if you are not trained as a teacher and suddenly you need to homeschool your children? These are prolonged stressors. So you have this stress response going on for a long period of time. The body isn't designed to cope with that. So what happens is you either have, well, not either, in the beginning you have very high stress levels. And so that's when you're going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, you can get everything done. You might feel really buzzy. You might feel really productive. But what happens as you go through the longer term is that the body can't sustain these levels of cortisol. So you will then get these peaks and troughs. And that's when I spoke to a client yesterday, and she said, it gets to 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I physically have to take a nap. Not a long one, just 10 minutes, and then I'm good to go. But imagine that your body has to be unconscious for a short period of time in order that you can continue with your day. Now I know obviously in France and Spain where siestas are a big deal, but this wasn't that. It was she physically could not continue. She had to take that nap. So she's experiencing this sudden drop of cortisol and your body just can't go. And then you also get to a point where your body will put you into a safety mode. Because ultimately you can't have high levels of cortisol flying around all the time. Things start to get damaged. So your body will down regulate production. And that's when we see flatlining cortisol. And that's what we think of when we say burnout. So burnout doesn't mean your body can't produce it anymore. It means your body has down regulated to keep you safe. But it also can mean that you feel like you can't get out of bed in the morning, that you're dragging yourself through the day, that you can't walk home from the supermarket without having to sit on the wall of one of your neighbors because you're too tired. Your muscles are too tired to continue. So we need to figure out where your body is in this stage of the stress response. And then we can decide how to intervene. So what happens if we've been in this lockdown situation since March, and there are many different factors that are causing people a lot of stress. So one, there's the uncertainty. No one knows when we started in March, no one knew how long this was going to last. Did anyone here think that we would still be here in November? Because I certainly didn't. So, I mean, I was possibly optimistic, but we didn't know how long it was going to last. Like I said earlier, people who have no formal education in teaching are suddenly expected to homeschool their kids while doing everything else that they are expected to do anyway. And bear in mind, I work with people who are parents who already the process of parenting is enough to cause burnout, depending on the needs or demands on them. So trying to do that in the midst of all of this. We've also got the issue of social isolation. And if you're an extrovert and you're sociable and you've been stuck on your own, that's really hard. I really, really struggled with that. On the other hand, you've also got, if you're in a house with lots of other people and you feel trapped, that is also a stressor. So we've got all of these things going on, and they've been going on since March. So yes, a lot of people are experiencing these feelings of exhaustion or feeling numb or feeling like they've lost a lot of joy. So I think it's acknowledging that the impact of the stress is absolutely huge. So what are we going to do about it? Well, like I said, I use a lot of testing and I personalize my packages depending on what my clients need. However, it's based on 3 principles. So there's nutrition, there's downtime, and there's ecosystem. So these are the 3 pillars. So overarching everything, what we need to do is send messages to the brain that our body is safe. Because if we've got this heightened stress response, how are we going to slow that down? Now, we've heard from a lot of people today with lots of really good advice that actually I think you can apply that to what I'm going to be talking about. But in terms of the nutrition side, one of the key things is you need to make sure that you don't have any nutritional deficiencies, because underlying that is a stressor on the body. I've talked a lot about psychological stress, but that is a physiological stress on the body. So when we're very stressed, nutrients that are particularly important, magnesium, B vitamins, and vitamin C, they're really, really key. And also protein, because that's really important for energy production. Now, in an ideal scenario, you would go for a very comprehensive blood test and we'd be able to look at, zinc, vitamin D, B vitamins. But as a general rule, when you're incredibly stressed, those are the vitamins and minerals to consider as your first port of call. Another really simple thing that you can do to support your body is make sure you are adequately hydrated. Dehydration is a major, major stressor on the body. So that's really, really important to address as well. Now, these are things that help to reduce stress. We also need to think about the things that could be contributing to stress. And I'm really sorry, guys, but this is what you're going to expect from a nutritionist. Sugar is a big stress on the body. And also another thing to remember is if you have high cortisol, that's going to push your blood sugar up anyway. You're then more likely to crave sugary snacks. But if you're always eating sugary snacks, you're going to end up on this roller coaster, and it's just contributing and compounding the symptoms. The next one I'm going to say is alcohol. And I know this is a really big one that people have turned to, or some people have turned to. And that first glass of red wine, absolutely. It's really good to release calming neurotransmitters, but nailing the rest of the bottle is not going to help you. And you also need to remember that it's worth giving your liver a break. So don't drink on consecutive days. If you can, space it out. Okay, so those are kind of some nutrition key things. Those are general. So if you were working with me, we'd go more specific. Now, the next one is downtime. And this is one I really struggled with. I am in my living room. You can't tell because it's weirdly dark behind me, but I work from here now as well. So I work from my living room. I relax in my living room. And what's tricky is delineating between work time and relaxing time. And when lockdown first started, I felt this need to be super, super productive all the time, and I just exhausted myself, and had some firm words from people in the Speaker Express community to remind me that I needed to take some time off. So I don't listen to my own advice. But what's really important is that we're doing things that are going to reduce our stress response. And so a really easy thing is like crashing out in front of the TV, but that's not going to help to bring your cortisol down. Now, I can give you a cheat code for this, and that is watching a comedy. So if you watch something that makes you belly laugh, then that's fine. Watch that. That is actually going to help your stress response. But generally, watching TV is not going to bring the cortisol levels down. What we want to do is do things like go for walks, be out in nature as much as we can. I live in London, but I have a park, so I'll go to the park. Activities that you really lose yourself in. So creative things can be great. Painting, drawing, colouring. People have got really into cross stitch. That can be great. If you're a nerd like me and you love Sudoku puzzles, maybe that's what gets your mind into kind of a flow. So doing things that you get very focused on. So that's downtime. Also, exercise is a part of that, but you don't want to overtrain. That's a whole nother story. So gentle exercise is really key if your adrenals are under a lot of pressure. So gentle walks and things like that. Now, the final one is ecosystem, and that is what is around you. So we're spending a lot of time indoors. I know Catherine will be talking about this later, but there's a lot of chemicals in the house that can put a strain on your body, on your adrenals. So things like switching out cleaning products for more natural alternatives can be a way of reducing stress on the body. Eating organic, now that can be prohibitively expensive. So what I would recommend is checking the environmental working group for foods that have lower pesticides versus ones that are higher, and then you can at least be a bit more selective on what you are going to spend your money on in terms of organic fruit and veg. Then also your environment in terms of the people around you. So if you are on your own and you are feeling lonely and isolated, schedule in calls with friends, make them a priority, put them in your diary. On the other hand, if you feel trapped and stuck because there's people around you all the time and all you want is some quiet time, think back to Sarah's talk this morning, have that difficult conversation and just express your need that you need some time on your own and you need some quiet time. So those are my kind of general tips for you based on nutrition, downtime and ecosystem. But what happens if you don't address what's going on with your stress response? Well, Andrew alluded to this just now with one of his clients with long-term stress leading to health issues. But when I said when you're stressed, you downregulate things, that includes digestion. When your digestion is downregulated, you're not absorbing your nutrients properly. And that leads to nutrient deficiencies, which feeds into the stress cycle. Another thing that will do is it will change the makeup of your microbiome, which is the bacteria in your gut. That has a knock-on impact on your immune system, and it can even be a trigger for autoimmune conditions. Another thing that gets downregulated is reproduction. So your sex hormones will be downregulated. So for men, this means lower levels of testosterone. For women, it could be lower levels of estrogen. It could mean that you stop ovulating and then you're not producing progesterone, which is calming. So frankly, that's what we need right now. So these implications are much wider reaching. You've got to think about the blood sugar issue I mentioned earlier as well. If your levels of cortisol are high, your blood sugar is going to be pushed up. And we already pre-pandemic were living in an obesity and diabetes epidemic. And we're not acknowledging the role that stress plays in that. So it's not just about feeling stressed and burnt out now through lockdown, it's got longer term health implications. So I urge you to take it seriously. If any of this did resonate and you want any more information, or you're putting everything in place and you still feel like you need support and you want to talk testing, send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat. But thank you so much for listening.